Hi, my name is Anna Resnick, and I work at Caltech as a student advisor and lecturer for Design Your Career. And I'm very excited to introduce Mason Smith to our Caltech Career Podcast, episode number 3, where we connect students with Caltech alumni so they can get inspired and learn from alumni in their career paths and their journeys leading up till now. So I'm particularly interested in hearing more about Mason's journey because it's so multifaceted, from being a page president to navigating graduate school to then working over a decade at TGS, now as a lead software engineer, all the while balancing this with being a board of trustee at Caltech. You have such an impressive background, and I am so curious to learn more. And before we do that, I am just curious if there's anything that you want to add to that introduction, sharing more about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thank you for the introduction. I thought that was quite good. I guess I'd add that my grad school stint was pretty brief, so I navigated grad school, but certainly not as long as most other people did. I graduated from Caltech in 2009. I did computer science and math. I initially went for a PhD in computer science, but after I decided against that, I joined TGS, where I've been there for the past actually 15 years this month, as a software engineer in different capacities. Now I manage a team of software engineers. As you mentioned, I've been involved in Caltech ever since graduating in a bunch of ways. Most recently, I joined the board of trustees in 2021. Actually, yesterday was my last meeting as a trustee, so I did a 5-year term. So I've enjoyed that a lot, among kind of many other ways I've wanted to stay involved with Caltech.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I actually want to hear more about graduate school, even though it's a short stint. I think there's interesting context to that I want to explore more.
Yeah,
but before we do, can we kind of go backwards and think back to your experience at Caltech when you were an undergrad? Is there anything that, when you look back at yourself then, that you wish you would have known, that you would tell your younger self?
Oh, that's interesting. I feel like pretty early on, I was lucky to figure out that I wasn't going to be the smartest person in the room, which I think, as you know, every Caltech student, coming from high school is going to be someone who, has had a lot of achievements and has done really well, probably, near or at the top of their class. And I remember I think it was David Baltimore who gave the, speech when we first arrived on campus. And he said, essentially half of you are going to be below median at Caltech, which, is a statistical reality, but it's, it's something that is true, but I think it's difficult to grasp exactly what that means, when you're sitting there sort of as a freshman. I think kind of learning early on that might be true in the sense of kind of in the pure academic sense, but that's sort of okay, that you have this chance to, you're still going to, you can still sort of fully take advantage of the kind of academic experience. You have a great experience there. You have sort of fun in all your classes and learn a bunch of things, but you also have the opportunity to explore sort of other interests and figure out what you are, what's going to drive your passion, even sort of beyond just math and science that everyone kind of brings in here. So, I think I was lucky to learn that relatively early on, but I know some students maybe learn it a little later and struggle a little more. So I guess that's something that I would probably emphasize pretty early on.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I also remember in your podcast, Life After Caltech, that you mentioned students can drop classes too. It's not a taboo. If they need to drop a class and try something out, it's not as taboo as they might think.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things that you don't really, it's partly a difference from going from high school to, Caltech or any college. You don't have that luxury. You kind of set it up at the beginning and you don't really have the luxury of kind of dropping classes or doing that. Here, yeah, you have that luxury. I remember being very relieved, dropping any number of classes for any number of like kind of silly reasons. But it's okay. And I guess that's actually sort of another thing I probably learned a little later during my Caltech experience, which is that at some point you can take on too much. And it's okay to say to yourself that like I'm actually sort of taking on too much, or maybe I can do take on 6 classes plus research plus some leadership positions and all that kind of stuff. Like maybe I could do all that, but if you don't feel good about it as you're doing it, then it's okay to sort of figure out pare that stuff back, figure out the things you sort of really want to do. And for me, sometimes I pared back certain positions, but like certainly just dropping a class is the easiest way to
that's true.
take some stress off of you. So you always have that option available, and there's nothing wrong with that at all.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I do think Caltech is such a rigorous experience, and it's so stressful already with the classes, and the assignments they're difficult, and I think a higher standard than a lot of other universities.
Right.
I'm wondering, so many of the students that I get in my class ask me, how can I prepare as a student for my career or prepare for a life after graduation? And they're trying to do career preparation on top of what they're already juggling at school. Is there anything that you would recommend?
I guess it depends. Like if you're talking about industry, it's a bit difficult. I mean, I think the two best resources are kind of one, sort of internships, to the extent that you know early enough that you're interested in a particular area, then, trying to get internships so you sort of learn more about it and can be kind of confident that that's the thing that you want to do. That's probably the best thing. I'd say the other really big thing is talking to alumni or getting in touch with alumni, because like particularly ones that are in the field that you care about, because speaking both for me personally and a lot of my friends who I've kind of directed other students to, I think alumni in general are really excited to help out students. So even if you just want to take a half an hour to sort of understand like what their career is like and sort of how they got to it, like I think most alumni are happy to just, take some time and talk to any student that reaches out. And so I think that's a really good resource for, kind of exploring a career or sort of understanding what you might need that, might not be obvious just beyond the kind of academics or the sort of material that's kind of technically relevant.
Yeah, that makes sense. So having those conversations with alumni to get that understanding of what life looks like afterwards.
Right.
Is that what inspired your podcast?
Yeah, in some ways. So the real genesis, I can take like the least credit of the three of us that are involved. So it's my sort of good friend who was also an alum the year below me, and a current student. My friend and I were actually at, I believe it was Alumni Weekend, and there was a student leadership panel. And, she asked a question that one of the students really resonated with. So they, got together afterwards and kind of hit it off. And the student was really interested in kind of talking to alums kind of more generally both about career stuff and just sort of as a broader project to connect students with alums more. So I think they kind of hatched this idea for the podcast, and she invited me to sort of co-host. So, I was kind of the latecomer, but that's how it generated. So I definitely give them more of the credit. But
no, I think you're still a big part.
Yeah, and it's something that I think as an undergrad, I probably didn't take enough advantage of, sort of talking to alumni and sort of understanding what happens after. I kept in touch with some of the people in my house after they graduated, but not a lot. And I think that's sort of, I sort of underused that as a resource. So I'm happy to kind of help facilitate like people sort of interacting with alumni or students interacting with alumni however they can.
Yeah, and thank you for being a part of that. I also think it's a great contribution to the community here.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
And now kind of moving from Caltech to then grad school, your short stint there, what motivated you to pursue graduate school?
I mean, grad school, I was always interested in going to grad school, like even as a high schooler. Like one of the main reasons that Caltech was my first choice when I was applying to schools was because and had such a strong research program for undergrad, so I could, be confident that that's what I wanted to do. In applying to grad school and going, like I definitely had the full kind of academia, track in mind. So like that's kind of why I applied, and I, got into a few schools, but I ended up at Berkeley for the CS PhD program.
I see. And then what made you want to leave early? Like, what was the reasoning for that?
It was a lot of things. I think the biggest thing, or one of the biggest things when I look back on it, is that it's for multiple reasons. I feel like I just didn't enjoy grad school, or at least not as much as a lot of my peers did. I just felt like they were a lot more excited about it. It's sort of, it's weird to complain about it, but, I got a fellowship for the first 2 years going into grad school. So I didn't have to pay for anything, which was, obviously like quite nice. It's silly to complain about, but I didn't actually get a chance to like be a TA or teach at all. And I knew that about myself. Like I really liked kind of tutoring and helping out students, like, all throughout like high school and Caltech and stuff. So like the teaching aspect was, I think, pretty valuable to me. I TA'd a bunch while I was here too. And I think I actually probably missed that more than I expected, like not having the opportunity to do that at Berkeley, or not needing to do that. I tutored on the side a little bit just because, even if they're paying your way, grad students don't get paid very much. So I tutored a little bit on the side, and that was fun. But I could imagine having stuck with it a little longer if I sort of had the opportunity to sort of teach and kind of get involved that way. I think that's sort of one big thing. Another thing is that I just discovered about myself and my academic interests. Like I really like computer science as a whole, like as a field. And, there are lots of different, kind of subfields and like specialty areas are all, and I find all of them pretty fascinating, but none of them fascinating enough that I wanted to devote 4 or 5 years to one specific area. The project I was working on with my PI at the time, it was sort of indoor 3D mapping project. So basically we had a backpack with a bunch of cameras and sensors and stuff. And so the idea was that you can just put on that backpack, sort of walk around a building, and it would instantly build like a 3D fully textured map of the stuff within the building. So it was pretty
really
cool. And like
cool.
it hit sort of like computer vision and a little bit of AI and computer graphics, like all areas I was very interested in. But I figured like if this wasn't the project that I was super happy to spend like multiple years working on, then I probably wasn't going to find it, or at least it was much less likely for me to find it. So, I think that's something that even having done, I did 2 surfs while I was a Caltech student, but I didn't do research during the year. So, those are all kind of, they're very helpful, and I really enjoyed them, but they're still kind of 10-week experience. So like that's the one thing you don't get out of it is that like, do you you want to do that for 10 months or 5 years as opposed to just 10 weeks?
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I guess now, what would you say for a Caltech student that is kind of on the fence of, should I do grad school? Should I do industry or something else? What are the warning signs of maybe this isn't for me, maybe grad school isn't working out?
So I guess if you're already in grad school, grad school it's a long time. I mean, maybe if you get really lucky, maybe depending on your field, it's 4.5 years. But I think typical is 5.5, right? 6, maybe more depending on the school and the field, right? So, I guess I would say you should always be willing to evaluate it, right? I think in when you're at high school or at Caltech, right, there isn't probably reasonably so, like there isn't much of a you don't think that much about like, am I going to finish Caltech, right? Like it's sort of kind of a given that you expect to, get your degree, which I think makes sense. But, grad school doesn't have to be that way, right? There's, and it's a pretty good amount of, time of your life you're spending like kind of accomplishing that. So, for me, it was a little easier also because I knew that the kinds of jobs that I wanted didn't, like if I wanted to go into software engineering ultimately, like after leaving grad school, like there are some that require a master's or a PhD, but a lot of them don't. So I know that I'm not kind of closing out that many job opportunities by dropping out early as well. But that again differs quite a lot depending on the field. Like some fields, like you really need a PhD, even if you're going into industry, to do the kind of work, the kind of work that will be most interesting to you. So I haven't quite answered your question yet.
No, I mean, it's helpful. It's helpful to frame someone's mindset around it, thinking about, is this industry, is it more applicable in my industry versus someone else's? So those are good questions for students to ask themselves.
And I think it's another thing where, like, I guess at the time when I was doing it, like after I had decided to leave and I was sort of figuring out what would be next, I was reaching out to all of my friends who graduated with me in either CS or applied math who sort of went into the industries that I was sort of interested in. I mean, technically that's reaching out to alum, but if it's your friends, it's sort of different. But yeah, but either way, I think it's the same thing. Like you'll definitely want to reach out to your friends, but you could also extend that to alumni who are a little further in your career, in their careers, right? You can get a sense for either ones who finished the PhD and like how helpful that was, or did they really need it, or people who didn't, and like are they still doing the kind of work that you would be interested in? So I think kind of fully leveraging the Caltech network is sort of useful as you're, if you are, if you've decided already that you are leaving and trying to figure out what's next, or even just trying to sort of make that decision or think about it if you're unsure about things.
Yeah, I agree. And the Caltech network is so important. And on that note, actually, I remember that you got your next opportunity through a Caltech alumni. Is that right?
Yeah. So in a couple ways. So my when I was sort of figuring out where I was going to go, like I eventually got an external recruiter, and I got that recruiter through my friend Caltech alum. He was the year below me. We actually ended up living together my first year at the job, actually, because he was in Orange County too, so we ended up being roommates. So I definitely sort of used my network to get that. At TGS, where I was hired, one of the persons who I think reported to initially was also a Caltech alum. He's still pretty involved in Caltech, actually, but he was a flim from he was a flim from the 70s, I want to say, graduated in the 70s. So so definitely a couple of places where Caltech network was very helpful.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's awesome how we help each other out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then your initial years at TGS, how were they? And what was your day-to-day like?
So I mean, I came in as a software engineer. Like the software engineer software engineering team was pretty small at the time. So I think we only had, I don't know, a few dozen employees, like not a lot, like maybe 40-ish. So it was sort of a little bit of everything, which is actually a pretty great experience for me. Like to some extent, that's what I was missing in grad school, like being able to work in a lot of different areas and get exposure to a bunch of different things. And so I was able to grow both like technically, just like as a software engineer, and kind of learn more about the business kind of pretty rapidly in my early years there. So
that's great. Nice. Yeah. And what kind of problems were you solving? What were the problems that intrigued you the most in your work there?
So I mostly worked in a couple areas. So I guess just a very short background. So it's a firm that's in the sort of quantitative finance space. So we essentially kind of trade worldwide in a bunch of different financial markets. And so I worked mostly on our kind of production trading system. So the sort of collection of software that actually is sort of executing trades against the market. And we didn't call it then now, but now the team I lead is called research engineering, and it was that sort of work, which is essentially sort of building tools and sort of libraries and things that help our internal quantitative researchers build models. So like most of the work was in one or two of those areas.
Wow. Yeah, that's very fascinating. And a kind of tough question, actually. I know that you've been there for over a decade.
Yeah.
That's a strong loyalty you have for TGS. Is there anything that would convince you to leave?
At this point, probably not. I mean, no, probably not. I think part of it is, I think similar to Caltech, it's a relatively small place, and I really kind of value the relationships I've built there, sort of over many years. Like a lot of the people that were there when I first hired are still there, and I think that it's ultimately like we're larger now, but it's ultimately still a pretty small company, all things considered. Like I know everyone that I work with, right? Like it's not, which isn't for everyone, but I've come coming from Caltech, coming from my high school, which was pretty small. It was only my whole high school was only 250 students.
Small,
So I know. I know that I really like that kind of small, like close knit collegiate atmosphere. And so I think that's something that is pretty difficult to replicate anywhere else.
That makes sense. So would you say the biggest value for you of staying over those many years is just building that community and really getting to know everyone's strengths?
I think that's like one really big piece. I think the other really big piece is that I've been able to sort of continue to grow technically and kind of move into different projects. So, because we're so small, we have to be somewhat scrappy, and you end up sort of wearing more than one hat. And I've sort of been able to continue to grow, like both as a developer and, I've been kind of managing a team for it's 5 or 6-ish years now, which is an entirely different experience. Like in some ways it's sort of starting from scratch, kind of, learning to, learning a different sort of phase of your career essentially. So, like being able to kind of build on all of that really helps. Yeah.
I love that you share that perspective, because I think some students can get fearful when they hear about staying at a company for their whole lives. They can feel like stuck in a place, but even within your company, you're able to navigate new roles and positions, and it feels like a fresh start when you make those transitions. So
Yeah. I mean, I will say though that I wouldn't claim that is the norm, right? I mean, I think you absolutely can get stuck at a company, right? It sort of depends on, it depends on the company, and it depends on what, like your own temperament and like what you want out of your career, right? Like I've gotten to do a lot of things, but it's still all pretty narrowly within sort of what my company does, right? Like I'm not gonna, there's no like side project where I get to learn about like self-driving cars or, like kind of deep distributed systems for like websites or something, right? Like, it's pretty narrow in its domain. And you might be the kind of person that, no matter how interesting, like you just really want to explore like very different domains. And if that's the case, then, it's probably going to be much more natural that you sort of move around a little bit more.
Yeah, I see. So would you say like the ingredients for success of like ideal company would be having the right domain and having the right community team?
I mean, for me, that's definitely the case. And I think it's difficult to appreciate as an undergrad, or like having not been in a career for very long. But, I think the thing that does like drive career decisions a lot more than you might expect is the people you work with, right? Like I think nothing will make someone quit faster than a bad manager, right?
True.
So like, obviously like, compensation and sort of the nature of the work, like all those kinds of things are important, but definitely like at the end of the day, it is where you're going to spend, besides sleeping, maybe where you spend most time, most of the time in your life, frankly. So, being there with people that you ideally like is pretty important. Right?
And actually, I want to know more about that. So finding people that you like, if you were in the position of looking for a new software engineer, a lot of Caltech students are software engineers or graduating to be software engineers, what would you look for in a candidate? Like, what are the top 3 characteristics?
So for me, actually, I have a funny story about that. So I actually did it was an event hosted, I don't remember the name of the event, but it was hosted by the CS department. I came in with one of my coworkers, and we actually talked about the technical interview process, just like how you kind of engage with that. Not just like the material itself, but like how you kind of carry yourself throughout the process. And, I remember kind of asking, the sort of audience of undergrads. I was like, well, what do you think that we are looking for? And one of them said, oh, like, you want like smart students? I said, okay. And another one said like, oh, like intelligent or knowledgeable. It's like, yeah, I mean, those are kind of the same thing. Like, what are you really looking for? And I told them, and this is, my answer at least, and I think it's relatively general answer is you're looking for people that you want to work with at the end of the day, right? And that is, obviously some of that is, being able to do the work, right? Having, and there's a intelligence component to that, and like, being able to kind of converse with them about technical topics. But, there's other parts where it's just like, do I want to work with this person? So I guess to more directly answer your question, I guess some things that get at that, one thing I think is really important is, some level of intellectual flexibility. You're, at the end of the day, for us as a, smaller company, I mean, some people are somewhat specialized, but in general, we get a lot of value in being able to throw people in, kind of different areas, stuff that like might be outside of their comfort zone. And so showing that flexibility of being able to work in different areas is quite valuable. And I think that, particularly in kind of smaller areas, I think that's going to be the case, right? Because you just don't have, we don't have the sort of manpower to dedicate like 10 people just to build tools, for instance, right? Google's the opposite, right? They have like massive teams that just care about how everybody else in the company builds their code. We don't have the manpower for that. So you can, someone's probably spending a little bit of their time on it, and it's important when they do that, but, they're going to get directed to a lot of other things pretty quickly. So kind of depending on the company, that's something that can be really valuable. Something that I think is universally valuable is being able to take in feedback in a constructive way, because no matter what skills you come in with, and sort of no matter how good you are initially, you're going to need to be able to take feedback and understand what you can do better in order to improve both in the role you expect and in the roles you grow into, and that's probably even more important. So oftentimes it's somewhat difficult to get at that in the interview process. I think it usually looks more like the opposite, where you can tell that someone is very bad at taking feedback, or you try to steer them in one direction and they say, oh, no, I know what I'm doing. That tends to be sort of a big yellow or red flag. But I think that's something that is always, I think that's going to be something that's useful throughout your entire career, being able to take feedback and sort of improve yourself. And that was a somewhat difficult lesson for me that, I even for someone who you can sometimes get really good advice from not bad people, but from people that you don't expect to get that advice from, or just because someone is really bad at something, they might also tell you're bad at something, and they might still be right, even if you don't, it's like, how are you telling me this? But it's still you still have to be able to recognize good advice and take it wherever you can get it.
That's so true. And I agree that feedback is so essential to our growth and to our learning. Do you feel like between intellectual flexibility and taking feedback, which one do you think students struggle more with?
So I guess my experience is somewhat biased because, I think the pool of students that we tend to draw from are all, are all very bright. So I tend not to see, I tend to not worry about that as much. So I think definitely the flexibility part more is going to matter. Because I think, and rightly, I think some students, come out of school with a very strong and narrow opinion of what they want to do, which might be right. I don't think that's necessarily, I don't think that's necessarily incorrect, right? And I think you have every right. If you know that's where your passion lies, then you should follow it. But I think oftentimes, particularly with sort of early career people or kind of new grads coming out, I think the thing that we sort of struggle with in thinking about whether they're a good fit is, they are clearly passionate about one area. Is that just because that's the area that they know well, or is it because that's really just the thing they want to do? And if you try to give them other things, they're not going to be as excited about it. And that's, sometimes it's sometimes kind of hard to understand where a student is at there. I think you don't want to kind of tamp down their excitement, or you don't want to like kind of punish them for having had experience in one area and being excited about it. But you also don't want a student that like is really excited about that and only that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for a student that is kind of in an area but not really excited and kind of ambiguous, more like ambiguous in what they want to do, what would you recommend that kind of student?
Recommend in terms of
Kind of building more of a sense of what they want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think the like sort of while you're a student, I think the best way is just to explore. Like you have the most time during the summer to kind of explore this, right? Like either through research or through internships. I guess if you don't know, then ideally both, right? Because I think it'll sort of solidify in your mind, like to some extent, what you think is going to be more enjoyable. I guess the important part, again, I think it's like, for me, it's sort of a yellow flag, at least like for the purposes of hiring someone for my team, if a student like is very confident that they know exactly what they want to do for the next 40 years, right? Like, because I think the likelihood that that's going to be exactly what we need them to do is very, very low. So, it's not like, I don't think you have to come in sort of knowing that like, knowing I know I exactly want to do this. I think the thing or at least I like to see, is that they've done enough of their homework and sort of understand enough about what they're getting into, or they're curious and asking questions about, what the work is like and what they're getting into, that you can be confident that they are going to be interested in it. The problem with sort of being too uncertain is that, like I don't think any given company probably doesn't want to spend a lot of time like helping you figure out your life to that extent, right? I think anybody's going to want some amount of confidence that you're going to be somewhat interested in the stuff you're going to do. So like sort of being able to display that, show that like you're showing genuine curiosity about the role or about the field, and having done, some amount of research to sort of show that you're engaged in it, I think is pretty valuable.
Yeah, so striking the balance between being engaged and curious, but also not too rigid and too certain of what you want to do.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
That makes sense.
It certainly might, like, I guess I would recommend that, students are a bit open to what they do, especially earlier in their career, because, you've only had so much time in your life to really even know what's out there and to explore. So like, you might be very passionate about, one area or another, but, there's always room to explore a little bit. And you have, standard like 40-year career at least, right? So like you have a lot of time to figure that out. So I would probably advise against any student being like too like focused or too precise about what they want to do, because it's just going to be much more difficult to, find the place that you slot exactly into. But it's I think, there's going to be a range of, I'm sort of, kind of vaguely interested in, say like quant finance, or like I'm very interested in this particular area or something. I think there's kind of room for how, like what you want to pursue, right? But the more narrow you are on your interests, like obviously the harder it is, I think, to find kind of a place that's going to fully match that.
Yeah, that like perfect place.
Right.
Yeah,
And I think you're probably better off like finding something close and like being able to sort of explore other areas. And like, you might decide throughout your career that you really want to specialize in the thing that you are the most interested in. You might find that instead, like you sort of want to sort of get more experience in a couple areas, so you can be sort of more generalist and feel like you can kind of parachute into a new domain and kind of come up quickly. So it depends on, you sort of figure that out about yourself a little bit as you progress further in your career, like how you want to set yourself up in that way.
That's true. Yeah, learning through doing and
Right.
just trying it out. Yeah.
Right.
And actually, kind of on the note of like the industry right now and the job market and students preparing for that, at least from my perspective, when I've been seeing students, it seems like the job market is changing pretty drastically every year. And from your perspective, how has the industry been changing? How maybe in the last 3 years?
I mean, even the past like it's pretty different even from 3 years till now. I mean, certainly in my industry, just like in all software industries and well beyond that, right? Like AI is obviously, it's hard not to talk about that. I guess I personally think that it's not going to be quite as drastic in its effect as I think the most bullish prognosticators about it are. But I mean, it's unavoidable to say that right now it definitely is going to it definitely changes the job market a fair amount, and it changes. I think it mostly just changes how much companies are willing to hire and how much they're willing to sort of invest in students early on. So I think like ultimately it's like as a student, unfortunately I don't know that there's that much you can do about it per se. I will say that as as someone in the profession as a software engineer, I think it's still really important to like actually sort of learn, sort of very specific to CS, like actually learn, the material to be able to do things without AI, right? Like, even companies that are, very AI forward, like you still have responsibility for, producing things that really work. Right now, AI is good at, sort of, 85% or so. Like maybe it'll get to 90, maybe it'll get to 95, but at least for a little while longer, like the, you are still ultimately responsible for making sure, the thing you're putting in works. And you do need that kind of level of kind of core knowledge in order to be able to do that. So, I would caution any student against like, kind of vibe coding their entire Caltech experience or anything like that.
That's good suggestion. And is there anything, actually, I think you mentioned there's not much you think students can do per se, or
well,
to navigate the changes.
I say that only in the sense of like, if a company like normally tries to hire a few hundred sort of new grads every year, and now they're only hiring 50, right? Like there isn't that much you can do about that. Like so to that level, I think, I mean, I think it can just be difficult for a couple of years. I've certainly talked to students who have asked like, should I go to grad school instead, sort of like wait it out. And I don't know. I think that's, obviously I'm biased given my experience. I don't know that I necessarily, I would, I think people who are on the fence about grad school, I'd say the nice thing about having gone and left is that I know that I don't have to wonder the what if of like, would I have been happier if I went to grad school at some point in my life? Like I've answered that question, so I don't, have that nagging at me at any point. So there's some benefit in that, but it's a pretty big commitment to do just because like, just be like it's a very expensive proposition for just figuring stuff out, right? Like, so I don't know that I would recommend it for that.
Yeah. Well, maybe are there any hot industries or even industries that they should stay away from?
I don't know if I have much insight into that. Obviously, like the companies that are building AI products, like those are extremely hot industries. And it's funny, like you definitely see kind of waves. I mean, you see these waves of like industries that have this clear ebb and flow. Like before, I mean, I guess sort of crypto for software was like a little hotter for a while. I don't think it was ever quite as hot. Like before that, like autonomous vehicles for a while was like an extremely kind of hot industry, and they grew really rapidly. And then like I think right around like sort of in the middle of the pandemic, like that fell off pretty quickly. Like you saw a lot of exits from that industry, say. So like there are these kind of waves, so to speak, right? Like I think a lot of people that talk about AI, like it seems like it's going to be the last one, right? And I'm a little skeptical of that, given that like you've seen a lot of waves of other like domains that have a lot of interest and over time like don't quite live up to their promises. So like I wouldn't call that career advice. I wouldn't say like if you get if as a student you get an offer from OpenAI, like it is going to be pretty difficult to not take that, and I'm not sure that I would recommend that. But I guess I just say that like it's yeah, I don't know if I can translate that into career advice per se. Just that, there have been like in the not that long history of software development, there have been like industries that, are hot for a while and then aren't as much. So
Yeah. Well, what I'm hearing from that is really it's important for students to stay on top of what's happening and just to keep up to date about, the ebb and flows that are happening.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and if there's an area that you, like I said, if there's an area that that you're interested in, like reach out to alumni that are in that, and they can, they'll give you the sense of like, both of their company and kind of a broader sense, like is how they'll give you some color on like what the industry is like as a whole and sort of how they feel about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. What would you actually, do you have any predictions of what your industry may look like in the next year or other industries?
I guess I have some. I would feel very foolish if I actually recorded them and they were wildly wrong. So I don't know how much I should share about them.
That's funny.
It's funny. Like this is risky, but that's fine. So in the past there have been. There have been like 2 AI winters in the past before, right? Like, I think one was like sort of early 70s. I think when sort of perceptrons were first invented, like the kind of very small unit within a neural network. And then I think the second one was like kind of rule-based systems or symbolic systems or whatever. But there have been a couple of things where like there was just a ton of hype about like how all these things would, essentially learn everything and you get AGI really quickly. And they fell off pretty substantially and actually like I think they're called AI winters in part because I think not only did they themselves like those kind of systems themselves not pan out, but it made people so pessimistic about AI overall that like there was this kind of dearth of investment on it. And so like I whenever I hear stuff about AI today and like how we're just like X number of years from AGI where that X is impossibly small. Like I guess my mind kind of goes towards like, well, we've had these AI winters before. Now that said, like I wouldn't bet on that. Like I'm not putting my money on that per se. It might still turn out to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but
We'll see.
I guess I'd say like I'll add that like little piece of history or whatever or context for people who I think I've talked to a lot of people who just aren't aware at all that like there was a lot of kind of momentum behind AI, in previous generations.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't know that. So it's really good to hear.
Yeah.
So yeah, actually, thank you for sharing so much about what your work looks like and the industry and just overall insights. I'm curious to hear more actually about life outside of work. I know some people emphasize, work is everything, but are you that kind of person, or do you prefer having more work-life balance?
I definitely prefer more work-life balance. And I definitely don't. I don't fault people who want to like consider work as everything, or like I guess it's the way people sometimes put it is some people work to live, some people live to work, right?
Yeah.
And I know a couple people that live to work. It's not the lifestyle I choose, but I think there's no shame in it if that's how you're if that's how you're wired, right? Like I guess that's something that never really. Like that question is never really answered, at least for me, right? Like I have shifted on that quite a bit over my life. Like I've definitely spent periods of my life where I like that was not the only thing I did, but I was like really, really focused on it. Now I I think like kind of volunteering or like like I said, I was recently on the board and I'm on a couple of other nonprofit boards. So like having some time to do that kind of work is pretty important to me. So I wouldn't like want to give that up or be in a situation where I'm so focused on work that I can't do that other kind of stuff. But I think it's something that you figure out, and like frankly will change over time, right? Like I don't have kids, but most people as they have kids, like their sense of where the sweet spot for that is going to change, right?
Yeah.
Like in when you're kind of very early in your career, like you have the luxury of like not having that many responsibilities outside of yourself, most likely. So it's a little easier to kind of plow yourself into work. And they're not to encourage any unhealthy habits, but like there's, like the kind of work you put in early, I think kind of benefits you throughout the rest of your career. So like there's some argument for that. But like that's not like a pace that I think most people can or want to sustain forever. So like, I think that kind of work-life balance or what you want is gonna change a lot over time.
Yeah. Would you say work is the most meaningful part of your life, or is it?
No. I'd say that like I wouldn't say that. I would say that it has certainly enabled me. Like I get paid pretty well. Very fortunate in that sense, and I think it's enabled me to kind of contribute to a lot of other causes that I care about. I think it gives you the freedom to like pursue all of the other interests that I care about, like whether that's just like playing. Playing sports or like I play or I have played tennis. I need to get back into it. Or like, I've always played like piano my whole life. So like music, that kind of stuff, or like travel, right? Like it's nice because it enables all of that stuff. I didn't mention the most important thing is probably like, social life and hanging out with friends and that kind of thing. So it enables that stuff, but like I wouldn't say it's, so like to the extent that it helps with that, it's very important. I wouldn't say it's the most important part in my life, I don't think. Yeah.
What would you say are the most important parts of your life?
Well, I mean, I think it's a combination, right? Like I don't think any I don't think I would be fulfilled with just any individual aspect, right? Like if I had all of that other stuff, but I wasn't working at all, I would probably feel pretty antsy, pretty unfulfilled. So yeah, I don't know that there's any one thing. I think it's the combination of things. Like, I like the work in the sense of having, I think it provides some amount of structure. Like the actual kind of work itself is interesting, and you spend a lot of the time with the people that you work with. So like all of that is important, but like having a strong kind of social circle and network outside of that is pretty important. Like having hobbies and other things like, that you can, that you like spending your time with. Like, I think all of those things are important. So, and I wouldn't, there's not one that I could say I could have at the expense of everything else.
Yeah. It's the perfect combination of things for you.
Right.
And what made you want to, in one aspect of your life, want to go back to Caltech and be on the board of trustees?
So I've stayed kind of relatively close to Caltech, I guess both physically and emotionally, I suppose, like throughout my career. So like, I moved back to Orange County after grad school, and have kind of like volunteered or, been to campus a bunch in various ways. Because I think like Caltech was such an important part of it's an important part of my life. I think it played, I talked about sort of the alumni connections helping me, get my job. So like, I think it had a huge part in where I am today. So I've always just felt, like both a strong kind of tie to the place emotionally. And, I think it's been such a important part of my career that I feel like, it's valuable to kind of pay that forward. So like when I was presented with the opportunities to join the board of trustees, I think first it was like, what is a board of trustees? And like, what does that actually involve? But as I, learned about it, I think it was such a huge honor to be nominated for that like there's no way I could say no to it, I think. And, it's been an incredible experience.
Can you actually summarize like what the board of trustees is to a Caltech student that is unaware? Yeah,
sure. Because like I said, I had no idea what a board of trustees did when I was a student. So, like kind of every nonprofit, every higher ed institution has some sort of governance board, either board of trustees, board of directors, something like that. And, its main function is primarily to provide oversight of the institution, right? So, the administration is doing all the actual sort of day-to-day work. So like we're not, kind of making those kinds of decisions. So, but we are kind of providing oversight, like making sure they're sort of considering the right things or thinking about all the risks. Like that's the kind of overall sort of goal of the board. In practice, like the what most boards say is like the most important thing a board might do, like throughout its lifetime, or like throughout the lifetime of any individual trustee, is elect a new president, which I was fortunate enough to like be there like during that process, as we recently did as of last year. So like that's the kind of most important thing, because that has such a huge effect on the institution.
That's for sure.
So like we're pretty heavily involved in that. But yeah, I think like overall it's that oversight thing. I mean, there are a couple of like, I guess I kind of think of them as like silly, no, not silly, but like ceremonial things. So, technically, for instance, right, and you hear this at commencement, like, but I think I forget if the president or the board chair says it, but like I think the president says, like, by the power invested in me by the Caltech Board of Trustees, like, I confer these degrees, something like that, right? So like the board actually, like, 2 hours before commencement, like actually ratifies all of the degrees, right? Like approves everyone that gets the degrees.
Know that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like we're not like going through with a fine tooth comb and like saying, oh, did so and so finish their classes, right? Like it's not. We're not doing that, but like that's like one of the things that technically like the board has to do.
That's really
so,
special.
yeah,
I feel like
yeah,
if I knew that as a student, I feel like more intrigued.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like I guess you maybe you go to commencement a couple times. You have siblings here or something. You probably only go to one commencement, or well, maybe some of you go with your friends. But you see these at the start of commencement. You see a bunch of these people kind of walking down, and they sit on stage, and I think there's like who are these people? But I think as a student, I was just waiting for the degree, so I never like asked the question or figured it out. But like, that's us. That's the board of trustees that are.
That's really cool.
There, yeah.
Would you say there's any value to students getting connected to the board of trustees, and if so, what kind of relationship would be helpful?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think the board of trustees. I want to say we're, I don't know, like 50% alumni, something like that. But it's all people who, are either alumni, have been through the Caltech experience themselves, or otherwise, so kind of engaged and intrigued and sort of excited by what Caltech is as an institution that they're willing to, kind of put their time and resources into being a board member. So, many of them are very happy to engage with and talk with students. There are always two or four student representatives, 2 in undergrad and 2 in grad school, that serve as part of the student experience committee. So, that's one of the committees on the board that's specifically focused on kind of the non-academic side of student experience. So like we have kind of that sort of formal connection. So if you know who those like kind of student reps are, then like that's kind of one way to get into it. We do try to have some. We have various events where like the trustees kind of are able to interact with students, like the senior dinner, and I think the reception before every year. There are always like a couple dozen trustees that are there for that. So we try to interact with students that way as well. But yeah, I mean, like generally speaking, I think the student or the trustees are always, kind of very engaged and excited to interact with students whenever that happens, because they are as impressed with the students as faculty and kind of everyone else on campuses.
Yeah, it's a great oversight of you and your other peers like in the board of trustees have good oversight over Caltech, and I'm wondering like how has Caltech changed in the last 5 years?
That's interesting. So, well, in the past 5 years, I'd say, I think the focus on student experience. I was the vice chair of the student experience committee. So maybe I'm like patting myself on the back too much for this. So answer slightly biased. But I think like how. I think Caltech's focus on the student experience has actually changed pretty substantially over the past few years. Like thinking about it as, thinking about it as a discipline. I think in a way that we haven't before has been pretty different. Like we had, I think for the first time, for instance, we had a visiting committee that came in a way that is similar to other academic visiting committees. Actually, I realized that I don't think I knew about this as a student either, so I'll explain a little bit. So I think it's either 5 or 10 years, I forget, but each division sort of invites what's called a visiting committee, which is just a bunch of kind of faculty or division chairs from their kind of respective divisions at other schools to come to Caltech and give advice on like essentially what the state of research is here. Like, are we sort of focusing on the right things, or are there any other aspects of the division that, you know, they would advise we kind of change or tweak? Those reports aren't released publicly, but like they're, you know, taken very seriously by both the division chairs and the board who gets to see it. And it's just a way to kind of like get like very kind of serious and directed feedback from, you know, our peer institutions. And so like we've done that, you know, that's been a staple kind of in academia for our divisions, but we did that recently for student experience as well. So like a similar kind of process, but with like many sort of student experience professionals from, you know, a lot of our peer institutions similarly. So, you know, and that's, you know, the first of our, you know, the first time we've done that ever, I'm pretty sure. So I think it speaks to an example of like how kind of Caltech is thinking about that differently compared to what we did in the past.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of Caltech students don't know what the Board of Trustees does and what you're involved in. So it's good for students to learn and kind of be engaged in a part of that conversation. Yeah, you mentioned a lot of in giving back to the Caltech community. You have this passion for contributing. Does that happen in other areas of your life?
So yeah, I mean, I'm lucky enough that I'm able to give back to Caltech in multiple ways, both with like sort of time and experience and also money. So, you know, I've given to a lot of causes at Caltech that are, you know, I focus a little more on student experience related stuff. So, you know, some of that is scholarship money, some of that is like funding for like ASCID and GSE. So like, you know, again, like having other things besides classes is pretty important to do. So like giving a little funding to help, you know, students be able to explore their hobbies and like other interests, you know, that's really important to me. And then sort of beyond Caltech, I think, you know, I guess just part of my philosophy is that like being able to, you know, be fortunate enough to like, you know, have money to give, like provide some, you know, also comes with like some obligation to do that in a reasonable way. So, you know, kind of philanthropy and kind of giving to other areas is pretty important to me as well. As that shows up in a couple different areas, like for me, you know, I kind of give a lot to international development. So like particularly for, you know, areas that are in kind of extreme poverty where, you know, a dollar can go a lot further in like sort of transforming someone's life. Well, not $1, but like, you know, that like an equivalent amount can go a lot further in transforming someone's life versus, you know, another area. So like that's another area that's really valuable to me. You know, I also really care about math education a lot. So, you know, I think one of the things that was really valuable to me throughout high school and, you know, probably helped me get into Caltech was kind of math competitions and doing a lot of kind of extra work in math sort of outside of the classroom. So I'm on the advisory board of another organization called Beam that does similar kind of work. Like they run sort of math summer programs for underrepresented students in they run out of LA and New York. Wow. But they, sort of run summer programs for them and then kind of help them throughout their like high school career, sort of engage more in math and apply to colleges and things like that. So, you know, I think everybody has different areas where, you know, they might be more passionate about. But I think that's important. You know, I like to encourage people to, you know, think about giving as early as they can. Because I think it's, you know, I think it's just a good sort of habit to build. Maybe that should have been my healthy habit. I guess that's a healthy habit.
That is a healthy habit.
I think, you know, that's maybe part of the, you know, as you continue to evaluate your life, always think about like when I can actually give back and what is it that I'm, you know, passionate about giving back to. Like maybe that's Caltech, maybe not, you know, it's fine either way. But like, I think there's probably something that, it's often a pretty personal thing, right? There's some aspect of your, life that's been pretty impactful to you, and maybe like you want to sort of pay that forward. It could be something completely different. Like I guess another thing I like, really care about is independent journalism, and like kind of making sure that like I guess nowadays like it's harder to come by, and I think it's really important for people to be informed. Like just like I think it's pretty important, like for the broader populace to have a better understanding of science, something I think Caltech can help out with, but kind of being informed in general, I think is something that's pretty important. So that's why like I think independent journalism is another thing that I kind of give to and I think is valuable. So it might be something that like you have no otherwise kind of personal vested interest in, but I think if you think about it, there's almost certainly going to be something that you're passionate about that you think can make the world better. And so, like, yeah, I would definitely encourage everyone to, I guess maybe it might be later in your career where it can be money, but even, time or expertise is always like you probably have more than you think to give in some area.
Yeah, that's a really good message. Just giving with what you can and what you have in that season of your life. Yeah, and actually, I know some students that are in a place of how can I help? How can I help the people that I like, or topics of interest that how can I engage more with organizations that are doing the things that are impacting the world? How did you narrow down the organizations you found?
Oh yeah, so I was so oddly enough, like the writing, like we had a writing prompt for like before you were a freshman, like a writing prompt. I think it was just to like gauge your sort of writing level, like when you're coming into Caltech. And so we had to write something about Peter Singer, who's like a pretty famous like ethicist and philosopher. And I think at the time he wrote something like I actually didn't agree with, but later in life, like shortly after starting my job, I ended up reading another book by him that I was like much more convinced by. And, it was just essentially talking about his sort of specific approach to like how he thinks about kind of charities and sort of how he gives. So like I personally was pretty heavily influenced by that. But I think that's something that like not everybody is going to be equally influenced by. So like as a Caltech student, like, we have the Caltech Y and some other institutions that are like pretty focused on, kind of volunteering in that aspect. So like, I think that's one way. There are lots of, they're really like, we live in, sort of greater LA areas. There are a lot of organizations in LA that are doing like kind of great work within the community. And I think that's, I think that's an area that like you might not think to kind of seek out and find, but like plenty of organizations like could go a lot with just a little bit of help, a little bit of volunteering, or a little bit of money. Well, maybe not money for Caltech students, but like a little bit of time. So there are just like a lot of organizations out there, and I think ones that are you might get. Depending on sort of how you are, like you might feel kind of more connection if it's to sort of a local community, and there are lots of organizations like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how would students kind of get connected to those organizations? Do they make a phone call? Do they look at your website and try to contact someone? Having been in?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, well, like a lot of organizations, I think will, like if they have I guess, yeah, some organizations might have websites, but, some of them have websites, and, I think they will usually advertise if they're looking for like volunteers of some sort. I know I have a few, I'm trying to think, like I have one person we interviewed on the podcast is like very kind of involved in sort of local community building, and I wonder if we asked how she is able to sort of find those things. But like, I guess depending on certain interests, like oftentimes there will be like websites that kind of collect stuff. Like for instance, for food banks, like you can find some sites that like sort of collect information about a lot of food banks that are in the broader area. So like sometimes there are causes like that where like there's some kind of collective way to look and find one that you're interested in. I am guessing that the Caltech Y probably has a lot of resources for that. So like they're definitely going to have some connections with a lot of local organizations. So, that serve a bunch of different communities. So I think that's probably going to be a really good resource to, find some ways to volunteer.
Yeah, Caltech Y, and then just reaching out
Yeah.
and contacting. Can you think of a moment that in any of these organizations that felt like very meaningful to you, where maybe like a meaningful interaction you had with someone that you were like working with or giving to in some way?
We did we actually hosted an event for Beam, the math program I was talking to you about at Caltech, because another person who's really deeply involved in it also was a Caltech alum. He's now like the chair of the board, but I met him at Caltech, and so he's another like person that sort of got me involved in the organization in the first place. So we hosted an event at Caltech with a handful of students that they were seniors, so they had just gotten into like a bunch of like really great schools, but they were talking about their experience throughout the program. So kind of hearing firsthand from them about like how it was able to ignite their passion for math, and like how being around a lot of other students who really kind of cared about math and was able to, they were able to kind of sustain their interest and really like explore sort of new areas and new careers and like new possibilities that they really didn't have for themselves before. Like that was, I think that was a really impactful moment.
Yeah, hearing that tangible difference that your organization made.
Right.
So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
I think I asked you earlier about what advice you would give a Caltech undergrad, but I realized I didn't ask about the transition from Caltech to, starting your life as like transitioning outside of Caltech. What do you think students should almost expect as like the normal life bumps that they have to experience when they leave?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I think the biggest thing is that after Caltech, maybe or maybe not, depending on if you go to grad school, but like to some extent, like the guardrails are kind of off, right? Like I think up to that entire point in your life, even through Caltech, like you are very sure about what your next step is. And like, I think you have some leeway in what that is, but to a large extent, right? Like after middle school, you're going to high school. After high school, you're going to college. Like you have to decide where that college is, but you're going there. Once you get to college, you're going to have to do the, at least 4-year degree. Maybe you stay for a master's or something. But like those steps are pretty well expected and kind of set in stone. And then, once you graduate, it's sort of a free for all, right? Like you can, like obviously like going into academia or going to get a job are like the two, most obvious kind of versions of that. But you can decide to do neither of those. You can take a gap year. You can just move to a foreign country and volunteer for a few years or something. Right? Like there's technically a very wide open space of things you can do, and that remains the case for the rest of your life, right? Like there's no path set in front of you and no like right answer to what you should or can do. So I think that can be scary if you like sort of that question is put in front of you in a way that like you might not have ever considered before. But I think it's useful to engage with, because like otherwise you can, I think you can find yourself sort of stuck where like maybe don't like your job or something, and like you sort of wonder how you got into that place. And like if you've never thought of it until that point, then it's easy to sort of find yourself in some local max, I guess, that you don't know quite how to get out of, say. So like I don't know if there's anything like too concrete in there, because I can't tell you how to live your life, but like I guess like the main thing is like it is up to you, like once you graduate and for a long time after, to like actually ask that question of yourself. No one else is going to ask it of you, right? Like or at least not in the same way that you're going to be able to.
Yeah, there's no clear like track after you graduate. Do you ever feel like, this is a question I get a lot from students, is do you ever feel like there's a moment in your career, or have you experienced this, where you feel like you figured it out?
No.
Yeah.
No.
That's real.
I mean, I think I mean, I think there are stretches of time where like you're definitely sort of in a groove, where like, you're pretty confident in the work that you're doing, and like, you feel like you're doing a good job, and like, most of the, aspects of your life are like in a good place. So like, I mean, there are definitely like kind of these smooth periods, I'd say. But those don't last forever. Both like inside of work and outside of work, right? Life happens. Like, those kinds of periods don't last forever. So like I don't think there's ever a point where you can say like I'm done kind of thinking about what my career looks like. Like I can just coast, right? I think there's always room to reevaluate, I guess.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And I'm glad you said that, because I want students to hear that it's really always a process of figuring it out when you're going through life. It's not this pinnacle moment that I think a lot of students expect when they graduate to have the right job and have everything lined up.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, maybe for some people that happens, but it is not something you should expect. Like I said before, like I've felt very lucky. Like I've had a pretty long career at one place, but that also is not the norm. And that's fine and expected, right? Like I think it's okay to, like if you have to go to a different job or decide that like, you want a change, then like that's fine. Like there's nothing kind of wrong with that. I think it can be scary the first time around, and because it's like it's new in a way that that like most up to that point in your life you probably haven't had to make a similar kind of change before. Like I guess it would be similar to like I don't know, like transferring out of Caltech after 2 years for like whatever reason or something. I think it would be like that, maybe that level of change, say, which obviously like most Caltech students graduating have not done. But I think it is an expected part of your career, right? Like, I mean, in this day and age, at least, I think maybe, I don't know, 40 or 50 years ago, yes, a lot of people stayed in one place, but nowadays, like it is more likely or not that you're going to move around. I don't know what the statistics are and like how many times you shift jobs over the course of your lifetime, but it's definitely like
Increasing.
it's increasing, and it's like pretty
increasing.
high, like more than 5 or 6, I think.
Yeah.
It's not something you should be afraid of. It's an expected thing.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, just to not be afraid of change. I mean, if you end up in a position that's great, then that's great, but life doesn't always stay stagnant, and actually it's always changing and evolving, so that's good.
Yeah. I guess the other advice I would give is like maybe not technically career related, but I think it's maybe in the spirit of other stuff we've talked about, which is, like outside of work, right? Like, and I think this applies kind of while you're at Caltech too, right? Like at Caltech, you certainly get graded on the academic work you do, like on your classes. But there are so many other aspects of your life, like your sort of hobbies and interests, and how much sleep you get, like whether you stay healthy, and like no one gives you grades on that kind of stuff, but it is a very important part of your life. Like, and that's true, well beyond into your career too. Like no one is going to give you like a yearly performance review on how many friends do you have, and like, what are your hobbies and do you like them? So like it is easy to let that kind of thing slip, but I think it's really, really important to, kind of maintain, your kind of social network, maintain your hobbies, like, staying healthy, right? Like you only have the one body that you have. So, like all those things are not as easy to sort of focus on or kind of think about in the same way you think about your career. But I think they're just as important when you're thinking about like how you live a fulfilled life, I guess.
I agree.
Yeah.
What would you say are your healthiest habits?
My healthiest, I mean, I go to the gym pretty regularly. I did not do that in grad school, and I suffer for it pretty tremendously. I picked up more like bottles of Mountain Dew than I did dumbbells, which is not great. So like ever since I started working, I like started going to the gym pretty regularly, and have like, I don't know, I was injured a couple times. Besides that, I've like kept up that habit pretty consistently. So like that's the healthiest habit I have for sure. If I could change that, I would probably also sleep more. Like I don't get.
Tell that to the students.
Yeah, well,
please.
I can't. I can't tell that to them with a straight face because I didn't sleep that well here either. But like, yeah, I would probably. I'm a night owl. Like I probably stay up till like 1 or 1:30 every night. And that is almost always like not worth it, right? Like nothing. Very little has ever happened between the hours of like 12 and 1 that was like, oh, I definitely should have stayed up for that. Like that was worth an hour of sleep. So if I could change one thing very quickly about myself, it would be like that as an additional healthy habit, like get a little more sleep. But
Yeah, I feel that. And I talk to so many students that are sleep deprived, and I tell them, well, once you graduate, you have a lot more time to sleep. So it's a good habit to
should
get
take advantage of it,
take
yeah.
advantage.
I think here I got. I'm trying to think of if I got 8 hours of sleep, it was not. I might have gotten 8 hours of sleep, but it was like 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. or something kind of ridiculous.
Oh, wow.
Like it's not. And I napped a lot. I think that helped a bit. But yeah, I wouldn't follow my sleeping or studying habits while I was here. But afterwards,
very
I'd say
funny.
yeah.
Okay, actually, I have a really big finale question. So
Okay.
take your time to think. What would you say in your life thus far has been your biggest accomplishment?
Well, I don't know. Biggest accomplishment is kind of hard, right? So I guess there's, well, okay, I'll cheat and I'll give a few examples. So certainly I think like being on the board actually is like one thing that I think is sort of not, I shouldn't say not an honor in the sense that like it takes a fair amount of work. It's like not something you just do and like you get to hang out, right? Like it's a decent amount of work. But I think I'm actually like, looking back on it pretty proud of the work we did as a board while I was here. So I think that's like, and it was in service of Caltech, which is, obviously an institution that's near and dear to my heart. So, I think that's kind of that experience is one of the biggest ones. Oddly enough, like earlier or last year, I spoke at discotheque for the incoming seniors deciding, and I mean it's kind of like a small thing, but I know I felt very honored to do that, and I like I think it was a great kind of experience for me. So that's something that like kind of an interesting highlight, but like something that actually does kind of stick out in my mind because I think it's I think to be one of the kind of earliest impressions of like you have these sort of seniors really deciding whether they're going to come to Caltech, which is obviously such a transformative part of my life. And so to be like one of the kind of first interactions with Caltech in that sense, I think was pretty I consider that like a pretty special experience. I guess I have like a couple of like work things that I'm certainly proud of. I guess they're kind of hard to describe, I guess. So I don't know if I can get into too much, but like, I mean, there are a couple of things at work that definitely I feel similar, like, that, it's a culmination of, both like kind of figuring, like kind of working hard on a problem and figuring something out, and still having to work with other people pretty closely to kind of like get something over the finish line. So I think those, like when I think about sort of work projects, that I'm proud of, like it's a combination of those things, like both the like technical side or having to like make the case to go in a different direction. And then being able to kind of back that up with the actual work and then kind of working with other people to actually push it over the finish line. Because, many projects, it's not just like you, write a paper or just code up some random thing, you're done. Like you have to like integrate it in part of this larger system and educate other people about it or that kind of thing. So, I can think of like, I guess a couple of big projects like that. But I think those are the things that stand
Top
out. I'd say.
highlights. Yeah. The collaborative environment, navigating that
Right.
is one. And I like the first two, how they're both kind of focused on giving back to students and what you can contribute. And I think it's good for students to hear also because I think initially when they enter their careers, they're thinking about what they want. And I like that you mentioned two things where you mentioned what you like to give.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's like, it's certainly natural to want to like focus on your career when you start, because, like I said, I think the early years of your career are pretty pivotal. But, even on your first day starting a new job, you already have experience that, your like fellow Caltech students don't have yet, and is already valuable, right? So like even starting your first day on the job or having already graduated, like you're already an alum that can contribute back to the Caltech community in a way that you couldn't before as a student. So like you might not think about it that way, but you already have that ability to give back, like just very, very early on in your career. So I think being able to take advantage of that and actually give back is like something that every student now, future alum, should
Very
consider.
true. Yeah, they already have knowledge to give. That's
Right.
very true. Well, thank you so much for this engaging conversation. I'm wondering, is there anything else you would like to say to our students? Anything else you want them to know before we wrap up?
Hang in there. That's like
Yeah.
I feel like everybody needs to hear that at some point in their Caltech career.
Yeah.
Like hang in there. Like everybody hits I think, a lot of people hit like a point where it's going to be the toughest, but like, there's always a point at which it's going to get easier, and you'll get that degree, and it'll be worth it. So
That's true. That's true. Well, thank you again for taking the time for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so
and
much. It was great.
I hope many students listen to what you have shared. It's very helpful.
Yeah, thank you for
I
having
think
me.
they'll all benefit from listening to you.
Yeah, thanks.